Hi everyone, I'm Jesse and behind me is my 2021 KX250, which is in dire need of a new chain and sprockets. Let me walk you through the process. When replacing your chain, it's important to also replace the front and rear sprocket at the same time. Putting a new chain on worn sprockets will just shorten the life of your new chain. This is also a good time to inspect the chain slider, the chain roller, and the chain guide. It looks like the slider, roller, and guide on this bike will be good for a while longer, so I won't be replacing those. I'm going to use a gold X-ring chain by Primary Drive, a 13-tooth steel front sprocket by JT, and a 50-tooth steel rear sprocket also by JT. Steel is heavier than aluminum, but doesn't wear out as quickly. I'm more interested in durability and saving money than I am in reducing my lap time by 1 millisecond, so steel is the perfect choice for me. Remove the front sprocket guard first using an 8mm socket and driver. Then, with a flat blade screwdriver and hammer, hammer the bend out of the washer around the sprocket nut. Use an impact driver to loosen the sprocket nut. This nut can be difficult to loosen without an impact driver. You could try a socket on a breaker bar, but you'll need to find a way to prevent the rear tire from spinning. One idea is to park your bike with the front tire against a wall or curb and have your biggest friend sit on the bike while applying the rear brake. Then try to turn the nut. If the rear tire still moves, try whacking the breaker bar with a hammer a few times to break the nut loose. A little WD-40 might also help. Next, loosen the nuts that hold the rear sprocket on the wheel. It's easier to do this when the wheel is still on the bike. Use a 12mm wrench on each nut and whack with the hammer to break each one loose. This sprocket has 6 of them. Next, use the wrench and 8mm hex tool to loosen the nuts and bolts a bit more. You could also wait and do this once the wheel is off the bike. Here's the master link. The master link is the only link on the chain that can be disassembled to separate the chain. Use a flat blade screwdriver and tap it with a hammer to pop the clip off. Then pull the chain off the bike. It's a good idea to turn the chain tensioner bolts in a bit. This will make it easier to fit the new chain. Use an impact driver or breaker bar to remove the rear axle nut. Remove the 6 bolts holding the rear sprocket on. Again, the bolts require an 8mm hex, and the nuts are 12mm. There's also a washer under each nut. Pop the new sprocket on the wheel. I'm sticking with the 50-tooth sprocket, which is the stock size. Before fitting the bolts, dab a bit of blue thread locker in each one. Tighten the bolts down in a crisscross pattern. Slide the rear wheel into place. Be sure the brake rotor slides between the 2 brake pads, and then align the axle holes. Slide the axle through the chain adjuster block and swing arm axle holes. Pop the chain adjuster block in place on the other side, and then slide the washer on and then the axle nut. Tighten down the axle nut just by hand for now. Slide the old front sprocket off the shaft. Grease the shaft and then slide the new sprocket on. I'm sticking with a 13-tooth sprocket, which is the stock size. I like to tap it lightly to make sure it's on all the way. I do the same with the washer. Just put the nut on finger tight for now. Your chain should come with the new master link. Wind your new chain around the front and rear sprocket and through the chain guide. Adjust your chain tensioner bolts if the chain is too short to connect the master link. Add a bit of grease to the rubber rings and slide them into place on the master link. Connect the chain with the master link. Don't forget the rubber rings and then the link on the front. Before the clip can be slipped over the pins, you'll need to compress the link. You could try to do this with a pair of needle nose pliers, but for a few dollars you could buy a chain compressor tool. Basically, it's like a little vise with groove plates that allow you to squeeze the master link without crushing the pins. I like to leave the compressor on for just about a minute. When sliding the clip into place, make sure it's actually sliding into the grooves on both pins so that it's locked safely. Also, remember that the closed end of the clip should be facing the direction the chain moves. Time to test the chain slack. 2 inches is what we want. Measure from the end of the chain slider to the bottom of the chain as you pull up on the chain. 3 inches is too much, so turn the chain tensioner bolts out a few turns. This looks a lot better. Now that the chain is adjusted correctly, it's time to torque down the axle nut. Use a 32mm socket. 81 foot-pounds of torque is what the manual says. To tighten the front sprocket nut, you either need a friend to help you, or you could become an acrobat like me here. Climb onto the bike and apply the rear brake with a good amount of force, while you torque down the sprocket nut. I'm using a 21mm socket and 59 foot-pounds of torque. Bend the edge of the washer so the bend is parallel to one side of the nut. Hammer it with a blunt tool to create a nice crease. Finally, put the sprocket guard back in place. These are 8mm bolts. So here it is. I think the new gold Extreme chain looks fantastic. You know, the ease of this project has a lot to do with how easy the nuts and bolts come off. Some of them can be a bit stubborn. If you don't already own an impact gun, I would highly recommend getting one. They are your best friend when it comes to stuck nuts and bolts. If you found this video helpful, please like it and remember to subscribe. Check out my other dirt biking videos here on Go Hobby. Thanks for watching, everyone.